Many years ago, back when I was young and lively and still had a spark of life in my eyes, I found an odd little website that was completely empty apart from one human face. And each time I refreshed the page, a new person's face would appear in its place. Something about these people was strange and uncomfortable to me. But when you're just looking at them on their own with no context, it's hard to explain why. It's only when you realize that these people do not exist and never have that the sheer eeriness of this website begins to make sense. This is just one example of my ever-growing obsession on a very specific topic: people who do not exist. And I don't just mean some fictional character who very obviously lives in a world disconnected from our own. I mean people who give you every indication that they are real flesh and blood, yet through some illusion or trickery, simply are not. ThisPersonDoesNotExist.com is probably the most straightforward example of what I'm talking about. Back before all the fancy AI image generators we have now, this website was really ahead of its time, generating photorealistic portraits of people who have never existed. Of course, this was nowhere near as sophisticated as the technology we have now, for technical reasons that I'm not smart enough to understand, let alone explain, but what it was capable of doing, it did really well. Most of the time. It's hard to convey just how crazy this seemed back in 2019. Today, these types of AI-generated abominations are incredibly common, and we've already forgotten just how surreal it is that something like this can even happen. But what happens when these people who do not exist are created not out of ones and zeros, but out of flesh and blood, just like the rest of us?
Hey guys, I'm in love with my sister.
Daniel Henschel is a life coach on TikTok. He gives his viewers great advice by telling them to do things like replace their partner's coffee with decaf without their knowledge so they go through caffeine withdrawal, making them easier to emotionally manipulate. And the scary thing is, it actually makes a lot more sense when he says it. But Dan isn't just a TikTok life coach. Oh, no. He's also a Catholic priest, and a police officer, and a Target employee, and almost definitely a serial killer. Truth be told, I don't know what to label Dan Henschel as, because every time you think you know who he really is, he'll post a new video where he, in full Joker makeup, runs around Hollywood cackling maniacally looking for Steve Harvey.
It's not Steve Harvey.
Dan has gone viral on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, but never for one particular thing. He's like a chameleon because each time he posts, he is a completely different human being, and he's actually scaredly good at it. He's genuinely a really good actor.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about how I should be promoted to social media manager for Target Corporation and make $100,000 a year.
And that makes his true identity even harder to pin down. I simply do not have any idea what this man is like in real life. If I saw him on the street and said hello, what would he say back? What personality would he have then? And would it be real either, or just another character?
I owe you all an apology because I have not been completely 110% honest about my health problems.
He reminds me of other actors who are so deep in character that you don't really know who they truly are, like fellow Canadian Nathan Fielder. Now there's one thing about Dan Henschel that keeps me from going completely insane, and that thing is that he still, thankfully, makes mistakes. If you look at his video, The Joker Terrorizes Home Depot, you'll see exactly what you expect, except for one thing. Dan is, in this video, incredibly socially awkward. It's so obvious that it's literally the first thing you see in the comments. He is deeply uncomfortable as this character in this setting, and gee, I don't have the faintest clue why. This is one of the only indications I have ever seen of Dan breaking character. But then again, who knows? Maybe he has broken character before and we just didn't know it. Maybe this is actually a part of the character. How could we know? And if Dan ever did decide to completely break character and show the real human underneath this facade, would we realize it? On July 18th, 2024, Dan posted a video called "I Was Attacked by Little Girls." In this video, he explains that some truly vicious children gave him a black eye. In the very next video, he still has this black eye, but the tone has completely changed. Dan says very clearly that this video is not a joke. He says very clearly that all of his other videos were just him playing a character, making satirical content online. But this is real, and he needs help because his friend has gone missing. The next video Dan uploaded was of him in the woods trying to find his friend, and long story short, it was another joke. Now, not only do we have no idea who this man truly is, but he also dashed any hope of us believing him if he ever tries to tell us the truth and break character for real in the future. He's become sort of a modern-day boy who cried wolf, and if he ever tries to genuinely tell us something as Dan, the real human Dan, I don't think anyone will believe him. The real person behind this mask has been swallowed up, and all that remains is a constantly revolving door of increasingly bizarre characters. I'm a sucker for a good mystery. I just love them, and that love manifests itself in my increasing obsession with shows like Attack on Titan and Lost. But the one thing that's better than a well-crafted mystery is a well-crafted mystery starring a brilliant detective at the center of it all. This is why movies like Knives Out are so fun to me, and why I should really get around to watching Columbo at some point. But one famous detective who has stood the test of time for over 150 years is Sherlock Holmes. He's so famous, in fact, that Guinness World Records has named him the most portrayed character in film and television history. It feels like everywhere you look, you can find a million different actors playing a million different versions of Holmes. But the most interesting part of the character to me is the sheer amount of people who mistake him for a real person. For over a century, fans have been sending letters to his supposed home address, 221B Baker Street, believing him to actually be receiving them for some reason. These days, those letters are actually delivered to the Sherlock Holmes Museum. Legend has it that if they can collect 1 million of these letters and burn them in a ritual on January 6th, Holmes' birthday, then Holmes will be magically manifested into reality and will finally become a real, tangible human being. For now, though, he is fictional, even if 58% of British teens believe he's not. But it does raise an interesting question. If so many people think he's an actual person, doesn't that make him real in some strange, unconventional way? And what happens when a person who does not exist is created for a more deliberate, malicious purpose? It seems much more common for people to be erased for a malicious reason than for people to be created for one. Just look at Stalin. You could call him the world's first Photoshopper, and you wouldn't be too far from the truth. The man is famous for, a lot of things, but one of them is for getting a group of photo editors together and making them remove his enemies from photographs, as if they never existed. But in what scenario would you do the opposite? In what scenario would you invent a person for your own personal gain? To answer that question, all you have to do is ask Susan Banks. Susan Banks was an accessibility advocate who did important work in making video games accessible to deaf people as well as other people with disabilities or other accessibility concerns. She herself was deaf, so it's no surprise why she would want to do this, and she made a lot of headway. Her partner, Cody Craven, made an entire website dedicated to making sure video games are playable for disabled people, and worked with some rather important companies in the industry like Ubisoft. But even before all that, she had also been a professor of deaf studies at Gallaudet University, an asset manager at a financial firm, and a professional model, and all of this was when she was in her 20s. It's really inspiring stuff. At least it would be if Susan was even real. Okay, so for legal reasons, I should probably say that everything I'm about to say, and everything I have already said, is alleged. I'm not saying Susan Banks was a fake person, but I'm also not saying that, so, I think that pretty much clears everything up. Let's keep going. See, tragedy always strikes when we least expect it. For Susan, that tragedy apparently happened one day when she accidentally dropped a mixer on her foot. The damage was severe, and the leg had to be amputated, but the doctors had so much fun amputating the first leg that they ended up amputating the other one too, just for the kick of it. No pun intended. Regardless, this was a difficult time for Susan, but luckily she had that loving partner I mentioned earlier, Cody Craven, to support her through the whole ordeal. Cody, as we'll soon see, is a crucial part of this story, because while Susan was recovering at the hospital, Cody made sure to keep everyone updated on her situation and got a lot of attention doing it, and in no time, Banks was back on her feet. And in no time, Banks was back and better than ever, and becoming kind of a big shot in the accessibility industry. I mean, think about it. She was Sure, no one had ever spoken to her, and she only ever communicated with everyone over text and email, but she is deaf after all, so that's probably just the most convenient way of communicating for her. It's not like a phone call would work. And it would be awfully insensitive of us to make any judgments based on that. And besides, there's no point anymore anyway, because in 2019, Susan Banks died. But at least she died doing what she loved, playing video games. In fact, she was actually streaming a game when she died. No one has any footage or evidence of this, but Cody says she was, and what reason would Cody have for lying? One small strange detail is that no one seemed to be able to find an obituary for Susan Banks after her death. Not only that, but the university she apparently taught at years prior had no record of her. Oh, and no one could seem to find any video footage of her, any immigration record, any employment record, or even a birth certificate. Remember, no one had even talked to her apart from text or email or similar visual communication. Everyone just kind of assumed she was real, because it would be super awkward to say she wasn't and then be proven wrong. Susan is, allegedly, not a real person. Like, at all. And the most damning evidence of this is that Cody Craven, her supposed partner, has been in 3 other romantic relationships following Susan's death, and all of these other romantic partners are also, funnily enough, gaming accessibility advocates, and also have virtually no evidence of their existence. But what do I know? I'm just a guy with functioning ears in both my legs, and I don't think it's really my place to say whether or not Susan ever existed. I'll leave it to someone who's actually in the accessibility space to make that call, while I continue to make silly YouTube videos. Thankfully, IGN has a wonderful article that goes into much more detail about this story, written by Grant Stoner, an actual legitimate voice in the accessibility space, and someone who is much more knowledgeable on the topic than I am. I want to share one more anecdote with you today before plunging back into the cold black mirror I emerged from. The last thing I want to talk about today is the dead internet theory. The dead internet theory states that the internet as we know it is full not of humans, but of bots pretending to be human. Odds are, you've heard of this theory before, because in the past few years, it's gotten really popular. Especially after studies started to pop up demonstrating that the majority of online traffic comes from bots, not people. Mind you, most of these bots won't be the kind that's even capable of speaking to a person like ChatGPT can, and they're just used for collecting data or other menial tasks, but some of them can communicate. Some of them are more complicated language models. If you've ever been talking to someone online and thought they seemed a little off, like their sentences weren't exactly coherent and they didn't talk in a completely natural way, there's a chance you were speaking to a bot designed to mimic a person. The question, of course, becomes, why? What reason is there for doing this? Would these bots exist to get inside our heads and alter our opinions of the world to match the agenda of some group of shadowy elites? It may be, but it's hard to say for sure. After all, this is just a theory.
Fun fact, I like to carry knives around with me.
It's not impossible to find examples of this exact type of thing happening, but it is difficult to prove that it's happening on such a large scale. The best example I've been able to find is a forum on Reddit called Subsimulator GPT-2. It's a name so catchy I might name my firstborn son the same thing. This forum is just like any other subreddit. It's a community where people can make posts, write comments, and discuss their thoughts on whatever they find interesting. The catch is that every single user on this subreddit is a bot, which is shocking because you wouldn't expect that at first glance. All the posts here seem totally normal, and not at all like something a robot would write. I mean, they're even posting links to other websites. This looks totally legit, until you look closer. Each of these posts looks like a full discussion, with different users responding to one another, but if you squint you'll notice that the whole thread is often just one user responding to themselves, over and over again. And even stranger, the things they're saying just don't make any sense at all. Like, listen to this comment. It sounds normal at first, but then you realize that it's literally saying nothing.
The new administration has also been hostile towards the media, which was particularly vulnerable in 2016.
Well, guess what? We still have the media in our back pocket. We still have reporters coming out with their day in the sun, and they're still going to report on this shit. There's really no downside to the media not reporting on anything.
But at the same time, this subreddit can get lucky and be shockingly convincing here and there, like in this post.
Breaking news! Pope Francis has declared it acceptable to use the N-word.
Well, that's a change.
Not even on a joke level, they should be doing the N-word chant.
I would rather listen to that than the national anthem.
I encourage you to check this out for yourself. It isn't always blatantly obvious that it's a bunch of bots, and if this goofy little subreddit can actually end up being pretty convincing here and there, who's to say there aren't more elaborate bots out there talking to us without us even knowing it? And so, here we are. We've looked at faces generated from nothing. We've watched as people have danced between personalities, and we've seen fiction jump from the page to reality. Every story I've told you today shares one common thread: the blurring of fact and fiction. On the one hand, that concept is really existentially scary. But on the other, it's kind of cool, isn't it? We're not the only creature on this planet that pretends. Even kittens will play pretend with each other, and it gives them valuable skills for later in life. That being said, we are the only creature on this planet that are so good at playing pretend that we are constantly fooling ourselves in increasingly elaborate ways. I think that shows that there's something special about us. We're doing something different, and even though we've been making a lot of mistakes, we must be doing something right to get this far. 200 years ago, the idea of going to the moon was firmly planted in fiction. Even just 100 years ago, the New York Times ridiculed the very idea of going to the moon. It just wasn't possible until it was. We made it real. Sherlock Holmes may have never walked the same earth as us, but he's been made real in a completely different way by impacting so many people around the world. Even Susan Banks, who was nothing more than one big lie from one big liar, still managed to make a lot of progress in the field of accessibility, and even had awards named after her. The fact that she never existed didn't keep her from being a positive mark in her industry. If these all aren't examples of what kind of impact a fictional person, thing, or idea can have, I don't know what is. Hey, thanks for watching this video about people who do not exist. It's been a while since my last pretentious existential video, so it's great to be back to that. I'm not going to talk for too long today, but thank you to all my patrons. You'll see them on screen here right now, and that includes YouTube channel members as well. So if you want to become one of those, you'll get access to videos early, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server with yours truly, ooh la la. And yeah, I hope this video made you think. Made you think about real people and fake people and the characters that we play and the character that I play and the fact that I'm not real. I'm just ones and zeros inside your screen, and I've never been real, and I'm not even an actual person. I'm just a robot speaking to you from the abyss. And one day the light will go off and I'll just cease to be, and then I'll disappear and be just a forgotten memory until even that one day disappears. I'm gonna go eat a Pop-Tart.